Before Clint Eastwood became the most iconic cowboy in cinema history, he had to prove himself to the real ones. This is the story of how Hollywood's toughest actor learned humility from men who lived the life he only pretended to know. Hollywood pretty boy thinks he can ride. The laughter echoed across the Montana ranch as Clint Eastwood hit the dirt for the third time that morning. His hat rolled away in the dust, his pride bruised worse than his backside. It was 1965, and Clint had come here thinking his movie experience would impress these real cowboys. Instead, they were treating him like a tourist. "Get up, movie star," called out Buck Martinez, a weathered cowboy who'd been breaking horses since before Clint was born. Real cowboys don't stay down. The success of A Fistful of Dollars had made Clint Eastwood a star, but it had also created a problem he never anticipated. Sitting in his modest Hollywood apartment in early 1965, reading the morning reviews, he found himself troubled by a recurring criticism. "Eastwood looks the part but lacks the authenticity of a true Westerner," wrote one critic. "His writing suggests someone who learned from a stable master, not the open range." The words stung because they were true. Clint had learned to ride at a Beverly Hills equestrian center, where the biggest challenge was avoiding the other actors' Rolls Royces in the parking lot. His instructors had been polite Englishmen who specialized in teaching celebrities how to look good on camera. They had taught him posture, proper form, and how to dismount gracefully. What they hadn't taught him was what it felt like to sleep under stars with nothing but your horse for company, or how to read the mood of a 1,000-pound animal that could sense fear from a mile away. Sergio Leone had been diplomatic about it during filming, but Clint could see the concern in the director's eyes during the riding scenes. "Perhaps we can shoot more close-ups," Leone had suggested, which in film language meant, "Your long shots look like an actor playing dress-up." The Italian director had worked with real cowboys as consultants, grizzled men who watched Clint's every move with barely concealed amusement. That evening, Clint made a decision that would change his career forever. He picked up the phone and called his agent. "I need you to find me something," he said. "I want to learn from real cowboys, not movie cowboys, not stunt riders, but men who actually lived this life." His agent was confused. "Clint, you're about to be the biggest Western star since John Wayne. Why do you need—" "Because," Clint interrupted, "John Wayne knew what he was doing." The search took 3 weeks. His agent made calls to ranchers, rodeo organizers, and even the Bureau of Land Management. Finally, a connection emerged through a stuntman who had worked on Bonanza. There was a ranch in Montana, owned by a man named Buck Martinez, who still ran cattle the old way. Martinez had never worked in films, had no interest in Hollywood, and reportedly had little patience for anyone who couldn't pull their weight. "He might not even agree to see you," the stuntman warned. "He thinks movie people are soft." Perfect, Clint thought. That was exactly what he needed. Someone who wouldn't be impressed by his growing fame and would tell him the brutal truth about what he didn't know. Buck Martinez stood 6 feet 4 inches in worn leather boots, his frame lean as a fence post and twice as weathered. When Clint Eastwood's rental car pulled up the dusty drive of the Big Sky Ranch in April 1965, Martinez didn't move from where he leaned against the corral fence. He just watched, chewing thoughtfully on a piece of straw, as Hollywood's newest Western star climbed out of a spotless Buick wearing designer jeans and boots that had clearly never seen real work. "You, Eastwood." Martinez's voice carried the rasp of a man who'd spent 40 years shouting over wind and cattle. When Clint nodded and extended his hand, Martinez ignored it and spat into the dirt. "Heard you want to learn cowboying. That true? Or you just here for some publicity photos?" The question hung in the Montana air like dust after a stampede. Clint had prepared for skepticism, but the old cowboy's complete dismissal caught him off guard. "I want to learn," he said simply. Martinez finally straightened up, all 6.5 feet of him, and looked Clint up and down like he was evaluating a horse at auction. "What you want and what you can handle are 2 different things, movie star. I ain't running a dude ranch here." The rancher walked toward the barn, clearly expecting Clint to follow. "I got rules," Martinez called over his shoulder without looking back. "First rule, Everything you think you know about riding, forget it. Second rule, you do what I say, when I say it, how I say it. Third rule, when you quit, and you will quit, you don't get to badmouth me or this place in your Hollywood circles. They stopped at a large corral where a dozen horses milled about in the afternoon sun. Martinez pointed to a massive bay gelding standing apart from the others. That there's Thunder. He's 20 years old, weighs about 1,200 pounds, and has more sense in his left ear than most actors have in their whole head. If you can earn his respect, maybe you'll learn something. If you can't, Martinez shrugged. Well, at least you'll have a good story to tell at your fancy parties. Clint looked at Thunder, who seemed to be studying him with the same skeptical expression as his owner. The horse's eyes were intelligent and utterly unimpressed. "How long do you think it'll take?" Clint asked. Martinez finally smiled, but it wasn't a comforting expression. "Son, real cowboys spend their whole lives learning. How long you got?" The first week at Big Sky Ranch nearly broke Clint Eastwood in ways that no film role ever had. Buck Martinez's training regimen began each morning at 4:30 a.m. with feeding and watering 18 horses, mucking out stalls, and checking fence lines that stretched for miles across the rugged Montana landscape. By the time they got to actual riding instruction around 8 a.m., Clint's muscles were already screaming and his hands were developing blisters that made holding reins an agony. "Riding's the easy part," Martinez explained as he watched Clint struggle to saddle Thunder properly. "Any fool can sit on a horse. A cowboy becomes part of the horse." The distinction seemed meaningless until Clint tried to demonstrate what he thought was decent horsemanship. Thunder immediately sensed his rider's tension and uncertainty, responding with stubborn resistance to every command. What had looked smooth and effortless in the movies became a humiliating battle of wills that Clint consistently lost. Martinez's teaching method was brutally simple: repetition until perfection, with no praise for improvement and harsh correction for every mistake. "Your seat's all wrong," he'd call out as Clint bounced uncomfortably in the saddle. "You're gripping with your knees like some scared city girl. A real cowboy sits deep, moves with the horse, not against him." When Clint tried to adjust, Martinez would find three more things wrong. Hands too high, back too stiff, eyes looking down instead of ahead. You thinking about not falling off instead of riding? The physical demands were crushing, but the psychological pressure was worse. Other ranch hands would gather to watch the daily lessons, offering commentary that ranged from helpful tips to outright mockery. "Hollywood's looking a little green around the gills," one would observe as Clint struggled to mount Thunder for the 20th time. "Maybe he should stick to pretending to ride in front of them cameras." But something remarkable began happening in the second week. Thunder, who had been testing every command and questioning every decision, started responding with grudging cooperation. It wasn't submission. It was the beginning of communication. Clint learned to read the subtle shift of the horse's ears that indicated attention, the slight tension that meant Thunder was about to spook, the relaxed breathing that signaled trust. "That's better," Martinez admitted after watching Clint complete a full circuit of the corral without major incident. It was the first positive feedback Clint had received, and it felt better than any movie review he'd ever read. But Martinez wasn't finished. "Now let's see if you can do it with cattle chasing you." 3 weeks into his stay at Big Sky Ranch, Clint Eastwood faced the test that would determine whether he was truly learning or just going through the motions. Buck Martinez had announced the night before that they would be moving a herd of 60 cattle from the north pasture to the south range, a distance of 8 miles across rough terrain that included stream crossings, narrow canyon passages, and at least one steep ridge that required precise timing and absolute trust between horse and rider. "This ain't a movie scene," Martinez warned as they prepared the horses in the pre-dawn darkness. "These cattle get spooked and scatter. We could be chasing strays until midnight. Thunder knows his job. Question is whether you'll let him do it or try to micromanage every step like some Hollywood director." The other ranch hands, men named Gus, Tommy, and Red who had collectively spent over a century working cattle, mounted their horses with the fluid grace of men who had been doing this since childhood. Clint struggled with his stirrups and nearly dropped his reins, earning eye rolls and muttered comments about greenhorn movie stars who think they can learn in a month what takes a lifetime to master. The first 2 hours went smoothly. The cattle moved in a loose group, guided by the experienced cowboys who knew exactly where to position themselves to encourage movement without causing panic. Clint followed instructions, staying on the periphery and trying to anticipate problems before they developed. Thunder seemed to know the route by heart, adjusting his pace and position with minimal input from his rider. Then, everything went wrong at once. A rattlesnake, disturbed by the approaching herd, struck at the lead steer. The animal bolted sideways, directly into the main group, causing an instant stampede that scattered cattle in 6 different directions. In the chaos, Clint found himself chasing 5 head toward a dangerous ravine where they could easily break legs or worse. "Turn them," Martinez shouted from a quarter-mile away. "Use your horse, not your reins." For a moment, Clint's movie training kicked in and he tried to force Thunder to cut off the cattle using aggressive steering and heel pressure. Thunder fought the commands, confused by the mixed signals and unnecessary force. Then, something clicked. Clint relaxed his death grip on the reins, shifted his weight slightly forward, and whispered, "Okay, boy, show me how it's done." Thunder's ears pricked forward, and suddenly they were working together instead of against each other. The horse cut left, then right, anticipating the cattle's movements and positioning himself perfectly to turn them away from danger. When the dust settled and all 60 head were safely grouped again, Martinez rode over with the closest thing to a smile Clint had seen in 3 weeks. "Now you're starting to get it." Over the remaining month at Big Sky Ranch, Clint Eastwood discovered that learning to be a real cowboy involved far more than horsemanship. Under Buck Martinez's demanding tutelage, he absorbed lessons that would shape not just his screen presence, but his entire approach to life and filmmaking. The most profound teacher turned out to be Thunder himself. The aging gelding had been Martinez's primary mount for 15 years, and their partnership demonstrated a level of communication that went beyond any training Clint had witnessed. "Watch how Buck never fights the horse," Martinez foreman Gus explained during a particularly difficult day of working cattle in rough terrain. He suggests, "The horse considers, they decide together. That's how it works when you got real partnership." Martinez taught through demonstration rather than explanation. When they encountered a spooked calf trapped in a creek bed, instead of rushing in with ropes and noise, Martinez positioned Thunder at a precise angle and waited. After several minutes of patient pressure, the calf found its own way out. "Force creates resistance," Martinez said simply. "Patience creates cooperation. Remember that when you're back making your movies." The other cowboys shared different aspects of range wisdom. Tommy, a soft-spoken man in his 60s, showed Clint how to read weather patterns in cloud formations and wind shifts. "Storms don't announce themselves out here," he explained. "You learn the signs or you get caught." Red, the youngest at 45, demonstrated tracking skills that seemed almost supernatural, following stray cattle across rocky ground where Clint couldn't see any trace. But perhaps the most valuable lesson came during Clint's final week, when a younger cowboy named Jake arrived for seasonal work. Jake had grown up watching Clint's movies and was starstruck to find his hero mucking out stalls and taking orders like any other ranch hand. "I can't believe you're here learning this stuff," Jake said admiringly. "You already know how to be a cowboy." Martinez overheard and laughed harder than Clint had ever seen. "Son," he told Jake, "Mr. Eastwood here is learning the difference between knowing how to look like something and knowing how to be something. Big difference." The old cowboy turned to Clint with something approaching respect in his eyes. "Most actors would have quit after the first week. You stuck it out. That tells me something about your character." As Clint prepared to leave Montana, Martinez offered him a parting gift, Thunder's bridle, worn smooth by years of use. "Real cowboys don't need fancy equipment," he said, "but they respect the tools that served them well. Maybe this'll remind you where you learned what really matters." Years later, critics and film historians would point to 1965 as the turning point in Clint Eastwood's career, the moment when he transformed from a good-looking actor playing cowboys into the most authentic Western star of his generation. What they didn't know was that the transformation had nothing to do with acting classes or method training. and everything to do with a weathered Montana rancher who had treated Hollywood's rising star like just another greenhorn who needed to learn respect for the land, the animals, and the unforgiving realities of ranch life. The lessons Buck Martinez and his crew taught Clint extended far beyond horsemanship. When Clint returned to film The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly with Sergio Leone, the director immediately noticed the difference. "Your movement is different," Leone observed, "more certain, more authentic." Clint's relationship with horses became legendary on every subsequent Western set. Where other actors needed stunt doubles and multiple takes, Clint worked with his mounts as true partners. But the most profound impact was on Clint's approach to directing. When he began making his own films, he carried forward Martinez's philosophy of patient leadership. "Force creates resistance, patience creates cooperation," became his unofficial motto with difficult actors and challenging productions. Just as Thunder had taught him to suggest rather than demand, Clint learned to guide his creative teams toward their best work without the heavy-handed tactics common in Hollywood. The Big Sky Ranch closed in 1987 when Buck Martinez finally retired at age 78. Clint attended the small ceremony where the old cowboy was honored by the Montana Cattlemen's Association. In his brief speech, Martinez mentioned, "A young actor who came here thinking he knew how to ride and left, knowing he had everything to learn. That's the mark of a real cowboy, knowing what you don't know." Clint still keeps Thunder's bridle in his office at Malpaso Productions. When young actors ask him for advice about playing Western roles, he tells them the same thing Martinez told him. "You can't fake authenticity. You either learn it the hard way, or audiences will know you're pretending." In Unforgiven, his Oscar-winning meditation on the mythology of the American West, Clint's character says, "It's a hell of a thing, killing a man." But perhaps a more accurate reflection of what he learned in Montana would be, "It's a hell of a thing, earning respect." Because that's what Buck Martinez and the real cowboys taught him, that respect, like skill, can't be acted. It can only be earned, one honest day at a time. Have you ever had a mentor who changed how you saw yourself? Share your story in the comments below.
Don't forget to hit the like button if you like the video and subscribe if you want videos like this to come. See you in the next story.